Okay.
Right. Thank you, Johan. So, before I give the time to our speaker today, I would like to give a brief introduction of our initiative, and then before I do that, let me show you our website. Okay, there is it. So here. So for those who join our event for the first time, welcome. And then we're MIT Global Humanities. We're an initiative under MIT Human Insight Collaborative, MISTEC in short. We're a faculty-driven initiative led by Professor Wiebke Denneket, who uh, cannot be here today, so she's sending her regards. And the purpose and goal of GHI, MIT Global Humanity is you see here pairing cultural, historical evidence and modern technology tools to drive global human flourishing. So, in order to address this vast and immense vision, GHI is structured in 9 pillars, as you could see in this Mandela eye symbol right here on our very front page. This Mandela eye symbol is really important. It represents how the different pillars or area of focus, so to speak, are interdependent and it works together to work toward a vision of um, driving global human flourishing. And 哦，okay, thank you. All right, so our members are expert and leading scholar from areas such as religious study, heritage study, neuroscience, cognitive science, cultural diplomacy, game and media study, history, music, computer science, literature, physics, methodology, performing arts, to name a few. So in today's forum, we focus on one of the pillars titled Medicine and the Healing Arts, a pillar that draws on historical knowledge and experience of medicine, health, and well-being across the diversity of human cultures and explore how they can help us address today's challenge in medicine and global healthcare. And a part of the 9 pillar structure, we have a 3 platform, like a more macro view on how to achieve our vision. So it is grounded in the interdisciplinary pillars that I mentioned above. So here is the structure of our platform as you see here. So we have 3 pillars. And the first is human agency platform. The important keyword for this platform is self. This platform asks important question that in the age of artificial intelligence and mental ill-being on how can we reclaim human agency in our age. So now the second platform is the global diplomacy platform. And the keyword for this platform is community. In a growing and divided and a segregated world, we ask questions on how can we live and problem solve together. Number 3 is our platform called University of the Future platform, and more specifically, STEMMA, which is STEM, Arts, Humanity, and Social Science. This platform focuses on the future generation, and we ask questions on how can we build the University of the Future based on all knowledge resources, that is STEMMA. The platform is part of the hard work of the GHI 4th conference, where our members from around the world and collaborators gathered at Korea University in Seoul last year in November. And there is a trailer here on our website that there is a trailer here on our website that you can look at the important outcome or discussion that generated from this conference. And besides our YouTube channel, this is our YouTube channel here where you can click and subscribe. Besides our YouTube channel, and we also have a LinkedIn page that is live now. If you want to further connect, and you can also join our mailing list and you will receive our newsletter and updates on the latest event that we have. And you will be able to find all the links on our website. And now we can post a link on our chat box so you can access our website if you haven't. Here. Okay. All right, and before I pass the time to our speaker today, I would like to congratulate once again our medicine and healing art pillar team for launching their first ever podcast series. And I know if you have done a podcast yourself, it is a lot of work, a lot of behind the scene research is needed just to produce one episode. So congratulations and thank you. And you will find a subscription link on our GHI website of the podcast so you can hear their first episode. And I'm sure in today's forum you will learn more about the podcast. Um, so I shouldn't take more time from our speaker today. And once again, our forum title is Rethinking Healing from Asian Wisdom to Modern Medicine. And our speaker today is Professor Michael Stanley Baker, Professor Ronit Yo Talim, and Dr. Joaquin Terronis. And please join me in welcoming them to our floor today.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start off. Oopsie. Let me share my screen. Whoops. Okay. So, welcome everyone. It's great to see you all here. The order of the presentation today, I will begin, then Michael will have his presentation, and then Joachim. Then we'll have a kind of round table, just around in the sense of around the globe, as it were, because we're connecting from Michael from Singapore, Joachim from the East Coast, and I'm from London, so it's pretty round. And then we'll open up for discussion, yeah, with all of you. So a little bit of background. I'll start with background of myself. I'm a medical historian. I've worked primarily on the history of Tibetan medicine, but more broadly on transmissions of medical knowledge along the so-called Silk Road, broadly conceived. So the issue of Eurasian medical transmissions, looking at meeting points or lack thereof. And this historical research has brought me to ask kind of broader questions. Questions like sorry, there's a typo. What happens when different ways of healing, the body meet? How do different systems of knowing negotiate or not negotiate? What counts as valuable knowledge? What does not? So all these questions that have informed my historical research has value and relevance to looking at what happens in medicine today. Yeah, so thinking about our pillar more generally, that those kinds of historical questions are relevant for what we're trying to do today, or to do in this podcast, in this pillar more broadly. So tapping into historically rooted medical knowledge that can enhance medical practice and public understanding of what health and well-being means. Looking at how societies in the past defined and practiced health, we can gain valuable insights into things like mind and body connections, preventive care, personalized medicine and healthier links with the environment, and thinking more broadly about different ways of knowing that incorporates practices from traditional medicine. We'd like to provide insights and tools from our research in medical history and also medical anthropology for the benefit of some of the complexities of global health today. So this is generally what the pillar is trying to achieve. So now I'm going to talk about two things that we've done so far. So Magdalena has mentioned the podcast, so we're officially, ceremoniously launching it today. So the Medicine and Healing Arts podcast, as Magdalena said, you can access it from the Global Humanities website under the podcasts. So we launched the podcast introducing, first of all, what we're trying to do more generally, and how we got to what we are doing. So this is the first episode is an introductory episode, and I hope you subscribe, and then you will get notices also of the next episodes. You can access it via the MIT website or via wherever you get your podcasts from, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So just a little taster.
Hi, this is Michael Stanley Baker, and
This is Ronnie Joeli Clenning.
we're really happy to introduce to you today the Medicine and Healing Arts podcast.
Thinking more broadly about what is medicine, what is health, what is well-being, what is the relationship between medicine and how we view the world, between our well-being and our religion, between well-being and the philosophies that we adhere to in whatever shape and form.
There's this lovely German word for the rare disciplines that need a lot of nourishment and care because they're fragile. They need actually a lot of sustaining for institutional support. In the German term is the Orchideefach, the orchid disciplines. So they're very precious and beautiful and require treatment, but actually they have an incredible amount to give.
To the theoretical mathematician, physics is soft. To the physicists, chemistry is soft. To the chemist, biology is soft. To the biologist, medicine is soft. And yes, to the medic, maybe the humanities feel soft.
I can't help but feeling ridiculously positive right now about the study of traditional and Asian medicines, because there are so many more avenues for articulating or expressing these interconnections of these kinds of voices, these practices.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Hi, this is Mike.
So so this was a taster. And the as I said, the first episode that is up is an introductory one of ourselves and the episode. The next episode is with Niels Fiche that you saw a little bit in the clip from the Behavioral and Cultural Insights Unit of WHO Europe. What Niels's episode is about the relationship between medicine and culture, basically arguing that culture is good for you and art is good for you. And that kind of more broadly links to the core core theme and platform of human flourishing of the GHI, and also to thinking about stemma. So not just about the H of stemma, the humanities, but also arts. And there's lots uh, to think about in these relations that we can talk about now or later. So more generally, the one of the key premises of this pillar is that history is not just a thing of the past, but it's relevant for today. It's relevant for how we understand human health care, and it can be very useful for understanding the present alongside science. So one of the other projects I wanted to talk about is this book, Public Health in the Pre-Modern World, Dynamic Balances, that I co-edited with Guy Geltner and Jana Koemans. And the idea of this book is to think about large-scale preventative medicine, historical preventative medicine as a form of public health. So the idea is to think more broadly about what public health means through broadening the scope, both historically and geographically, about what public health is and has been. And yeah, the subtitle of this book, which was meant to be the title of this book, Dynamic Balances, describes, comes up in the various systems that are discussed in the book. So covering the realms of mind-body connections, lifestyle, nutrition, the environment, and emotional well-being. So all these things that we look at through a historical lens have important repercussions or a meaning in our day and age. So we're having a book launch later this month at Oxford, and we're very pleased that the book raised interest not just amongst historians, but we have a public health person, Dr. Osman Khan, who is a public health consultant at the NHS that has found the book very inspiring and is coming to join us in this book launch. We'll put a link to the book launch. There's also an opportunity to join online. So we'll put it on the GHI website. What next? We'll talk about this more later, but one thing is that we would like to produce more podcast episodes given available funding. And the second thing is to develop further links with the WHO traditional medicine section, which brings me to pass on the baton to Michael, who will speak about this too. So let me stop sharing.
And let's see.
Oops. Yes.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me okay? can't see anybody right now, so let's see. Yeah, so hi, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Really appreciate you coming to spend a bit of time with us. I'm going to be introducing to you sort of some of the ways in which we have been thinking about traditional medicines and their relevance, both historical information in the past and and how they inform the present, but also how the present has informed the past. Getting ahead of myself here. So what you see here is the front page of the website Polyglot Asian Medicines, which you feel free to browse if you like, alongside while we're talking. And part of this website was inspired by the first man you see here, Uncle Ng, who developed a herbal garden on my campus here at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. And so over the years I've been here, I've been taking students to go visit his classes, working with TCM practitioners who prescribe these herbs. And I also asked Uncle Ng, well, where do you get your herbs from? Where did you get your knowledge from? And he said, well, he's an autodidact, and he taught himself. And so I said, can you show me? Oh, and my PowerPoint's getting excited and moving ahead. Um, so he shared with me his library, and from there I developed some. Mhm. I developed this a website and some ways of looking at linking across the Malay herbs that he was using, and but he speaks in Chinese, so this posed this question about the migration of the use of herbs across linguistic communities. Um, so with the help of his library, which he kindly shared with me, all these kind of Malay texts in Chinese. Um, we began developing here this synonymy, which links across traditional Chinese through the botany to Malay language. And we've since expanded with collaborators in South India at TDU University in Bengaluru to encompass another 12 South Asian languages, Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, Kannada, Telugu, etc. One of the things that we can get from this is a fairly synoptic, broad scale view of the total of kind of species that are being used across these traditions, so far as we can see from the sources we have. And already we've been able to come to some summative information about ecological impact on the production of these herbs through human agriculture or human environmental change. So we can begin to link already the survivability of these traditions with global warming and other kinds of human damage to the environment. Um, but what we've also been able to do is do historical mapping. So taking the early herbal medical tradition, mapping them across the landscape, and develop large-scale corpuses of traditional texts and we're currently planning to develop AI analysis of these corpuses and link them to biochemical data about the herbs that are available online and kind of reread the Tang Dynasty, as it were, from a molecular standpoint. So one of the things that it shows, for example, the early vision of how um, um, how what the early origins of the Chinese materia medica were basically when this small section of between two mountains, Songshan and Taishan and Handan in the north. But when we used GIS mapping, we found out that in fact it grew up along riverways and through microeconomy and through micro trading. So, papers come out about that, about um, showing how it was early traders whose work was excluded by traditional. Sorry, my PowerPoint is really going ahead of me. um, how traditional traders were being excluded by the Confucian tradition, because the Confucian tradition tends to not include technical accuracy. Um, and so, but with this data, what that's invited tradition modern day farmers is to now compare those. Sorry about this. To compare those sites. Let's go back. Here we go. To compare those sites in China to what we have across the world. So you can see American herbal farmers are looking at common microenvironments that they can grow herbs in today and migrate these traditions. But that also has implications on efficacy. How much does soil and light and the other kind of nutrients affect the efficacy of those herbs? So another project is we have highly segmented Chinese corpuses, and we want to expand to include Sanskrit and use kind of AI analytics to model recipe stylistics and discover how the common drugs, that the common species that we can see through the synonymy, are being used across different schools of thought and possibly across cultures, and then map the kind of um, the auto wow this slides um, the biochemical contents of these herbs across and to see whether we can see commonalities being used in India and in China, despite very different nomenclature, which are currently unsearchable at a large scale. We can learn if we can learn about the transfer of these traditions historically, but also, of course, because we have the biomedical contents and they're mapping onto modern day diseases. There's a potential for application of these to modern day healthcare and researching these through a variety of modern methods. Um, so with that, Ronit and I in December, we went to the Global Summit on Traditional Medicine in Delhi, put on by the WHO, which had a huge variety of different kind of approaches to medicine and really made this statement that traditional medicine being used by 4 billion people in the world is anything but not mainstream. It is entirely a mainstream medicine. And so the question then is, how do mainstream methods of circulating knowledge, of legislating and funding this kind of knowledge, how do they operate in a biomedically defined world? So there were all kinds of different approaches. So the opening exhibit was we contributed to as historians. It started out with introductions to Chinese and to Ayurvedic medicine. There was a little bit of global soft diplomacy going on through these parallel displays. And then we were kind of key consultants on this display, traditional medicine healing across millennia and countries, and which scooped up healing traditions from across the known world, but they called on people with philological skills, historical acumen to help keep these kind of registered authoritative, as it were. And so this ended up being a 22-meter long display with a lot of detail from Greco-Arabic, Indian, Chinese, um, Mesopotamian medicine, Egyptian medicine, all being included in this grand display, kind of bringing together the known world and showing how there's a common heritage for the 4 billion people living today. And walking through the rest of the exhibit, they opened into a section on restoring balance, where you had practitioners of different traditions from around the world. You can see the Peruvian and the shamanic healers, the Peruvian and the Mongolian shamanic healers. There you can see Bhutanese and Thai massage being performed. Um, there were herbal displays of herbal species, both sort of samples as well as herbaria. There was meditation practice, there was yoga practice being taught. There were interviews of famous historical scholars, as you can see in the bottom right. Um, and but what was also interesting, they had a section on sort of new tech, new IP, new economies of these kind of knowledge. And so the section on meditation was really fascinating. We had, the optimization of brain waves, meditation boosts your immune system, comparing meditation training to a brain gym, very modern metaphors for these ancient traditions. And, its utility for things like burnout and aging prevention and blood pressure. And so they had displays where people were active exercises where people would put on new practitioners would try on neural measurers and could get scans live in the room and observe how their meditation practice was progressing through sort of digital analysis, and also capturing their emotional state, their heart rhythm. So it was very much by this at this in this context, you can see that the tradition and modernity were seamlessly being integrated here without any of the kind of binaries that we have inherited from, from the past. And they really modeled a completely new step forward. Additionally, they're looking at new digital technology. You have the AI doctor, for example. You have techno heritage of Ayurveda, traditional medicine, innovation, evaluation tools, but also the ethical concerns. What about the ethics of AI? How about the governance and ethics of AI for health? What kind of guiding principles are important to keep in mind? And also looking at blockchain traceability, looking at the financial tracking, but also the legal tracking and the provenance of these kinds of knowledges. So where I'm a philologist by training, so where I think of as what I think of as footnotes, the most modern expression of that is blockchain that's legible to the whole world. Who has known to use a product for a disease, in what region, at what time? And so there's this and these ethical considerations about the ecology. What about the legal personhood of nature? So they really brought in quite important and cutting edge global concerns into this question about how to manage, how to support, protect, produce, and allow to flourish traditional medicines. Um, so one of the important landmarks that they produced was the Traditional Medicine Global Library, which was actually designed predominantly in Brazil, although it draws from tools and databases all around the world. And so, we're starting initiatives here at NTU to kind of engage with the current state of data that's available, and to engage with sort of global and local, regional national public health policy. So, but with this note about the centering of the WHO and its work in Brazil, that's, I think, the opportune moment for me to hand off to Joachim so he can tell us some more about his work looking at traditional health in Berlin.
Thank you. Um, give me just a second to get sorry, share my PowerPoint. Um, So my presentation will probably be a little bit briefer since all of what I'm going to present is future facing and projects I'm going to be working on over the summer. The first of these is a research trip to Southeast Asia. As Michael alluded to, my grounding is in Latin American studies and specifically as a Brazilianist. And so I wanted to get a sense of how traditional medicine is studied and institutionalized in other parts of the world. So I've got a fairly generous travel grant to get a feel for this in Southeast Asia. The goal isn't for me to overnight become an expert in Southeast Asian traditional medicine, but more to have a comparative um, approach when I take this back with me to Brazil. So these pictures are from online. Hopefully next year for our next healing pillar presentation, I'll have actual pictures that I've taken. Most of my work is going to be in Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Bangkok, and Chiang Mai. I'd hoped to meet with Michael in Singapore, but it looks like we'll be crossing paths in the air. He'll be heading back to Singapore, just as I'm heading from Singapore to Bangkok. But I'm very excited to, particularly since I'm now, working with Rona and Michael in the healing arts pillar. They've already started to expand my horizons, and this is just another chance to really approach my work from a much deeper comparatist perspective. So that's the first project. Then I'll go back to Brazil. And the two projects the two collaborations that I want to develop, or one to establish and the other to continue developing in Brazil, have to do with Afro-Brazilian and indigenous medicine. The first collaboration I want to establish is with João Paulo Barreto. He's a member of the Masha Tucano people a professor at the Federal University of Amazonas, and actually the first indigenous person to receive a PhD in anthropology from the Federal University of Amazonas. Only in 2021, which is really sort of mind-blowing, given that Amazonas is a state in Brazil that is who's uh, with the largest indigenous population in the country, and he established the Centro de Medicina Indígena da Amazônia, the Center for Indigenous Medicine of Amazonia, Bashirico That's been it's going to reach it's going to be 10 years old in 2027. And so I'm really looking forward to establishing a dialogue with Barreto on uh, especially after the trip to Southeast Asia and having a sense for how traditional medicine is studied in a different part of the world to sort of get his perspective on what is happening with indigenous medicine in Brazil. This is an area, and I think Michael also alluded to this with the reference to the WHO Traditional Medicine Library. It's an area that the Brazilian government has been heavily investing in the last 10 years, but it is very recent. 15 or 20 years ago, there was very little energy or interest in having this institution, in having this knowledge institutionalized and systematized. And so that's one collaboration that I'll get going. Hopefully, maybe even interest Professor Barreto in joining us in one way or another, whether for a podcast or as a collaborator for the Pillar. And then the second project, this is the most substantive of the three projects I'm presenting on, is with Axé Leobá. Axé Leobá is the oldest Afro-Brazilian temple, Sao Paulo. It just turned 75 last year. It was the first in the state of Sao Paulo to be recognized as a heritage site in 1990, and the second one in all of Brazil to gain that recognition. I've been partnering. They've been amazing teaching and research partners since 2017. Previous research project that I had was on the response in Afro-Brazilian religions to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and I was able to interview several members of the temple who were around during the 80s and 90s to shed some light on that. And I take a group of MIT students to Brazil every January, and they get to spend time within the temple and with the elders of the temple, learning a bit about the traditions. Maybe before I explain what I'm doing with them, just to give you a very, very brief overview of Candomblé, which is the Afro-Brazilian religion practiced at Axé Leobá. Candomblé is referred to as a religion, but really probably better thought of as like a series of interrelated religious traditions. Candomblé is not a centralized religion. It's a series of traditions that arise in Brazil during enslavement. The enslaved peoples from across Western Central Africa bring their religious traditions with them and have to practice them in secret within the colonial regime. And that means that these religious traditions sort of develop independently in different parts of Brazil and also become a syncretic fusion of a variety of religious traditions, along with Catholicism and along with some indigenous traditions as well. It was illegal to practice candomblé until the middle part of the 20th century. But since then, candomblé has become a symbol of national cultural heritage. And so it's been able to be practiced in public and has flourished in the last 50 or so years. But that history of secrecy and decentralization still has effects um, on Candomblé to this day. Because it is a decentralized series of religious traditions, it means that there really isn't like a corpus of religious texts. There even isn't even like a standard corpus of oral traditions, right? Different temples or groups of temples have their own oral traditions and and knowledge that they've passed on over decades and over centuries. And so the goal of the project that I'm going to be embarking on with Aché Leoba is to create a digital archive. This all started when one of the members of the temple who's beginning a PhD in cultural heritage was sort of digging through the temple's archives and found a small book by one of the former matriarch of the temple, my Silvia de Ochala, who's in the bottom, whose image is in the bottom right corner. And this is a book that was published in 1980, so towards the tail end of the military dictatorship in Brazil. And it's called, the title is just a profile of Achille Leoba, and it's this neat little guidebook to the temple that collects everything from the oral history of the temple to some of its teachings, religious teachings, its herb lore. And we got Fabio, the temple member who's pursuing his PhD in cultural studies, and I started to think about like, well, what would this look like today, right? What would it look like to try to compile this knowledge and make it publicly available? And so that's the conversations we're going to be having this summer over how to create this digital archive. There's some, you know, uh, complex ethical questions we need to negotiate while we're doing that. Part of it, one of those is that Candomblé is an initiatory religion, right? So some knowledge can be made publicly available. Other aspects of the knowledge, both religious and medicinal, it's only available to initiates, and some of that is even only available to elders in the temple. So how do you create an archive that has that acknowledges these different forms of knowledge, and then we also have to grapple with the history of epistemic extractivism in Brazil, where white elites have often gone into Afro-Brazilian and indigenous communities, extracted knowledge, right, without having any sort of reciprocal relationship. So over the summer, we're going to be figuring out what will this digital archive look like? How will it be organized in a way that is um, responsible and ethical, but also that meets the needs first and foremost of the temple of Ashe Leoba, and then maybe have that also be a model for other temples in Brazil to also start collecting some of this knowledge. And ideally, if we have enough of these digital archives, begin a project to start tracing lineages and think historically about how knowledge has been transmitted across temples and across geographic regions in Brazil. So that's what I'll be working over the summer. And I think the idea now is to have a brief roundtable and to start bringing in folks from the audience to discuss.
Yeah. Mm, yeah. Any thoughts about how connecting threads, or
Yeah,
initial connecting threads, or thoughts about, yeah, how we want to proceed and so on.
sure. I think one of the things that you're bringing up, Joaquin, about the kind of the capture of indigenous knowledge and the extraction and its, inequitable use, it was a really, really big concern at the WHO. There were lots of panels on indigenous IP protection, and questions. And I think I put a couple of, images in the slides, but it's a real issue. Um, and particularly those people in India, because they have some interventions there that have been going on for 20 years with the TKDL, the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, which is made for IP protection. So they, codified a lot of the core Vedic texts and say these things are prior art and cannot be, cannot have new IP developed on them. Um, and I think this is a big problem with hesitancy. There's a lot of exploration that people want to be doing with indigenous tribes, and local people, but they're very hesitant because they don't want their IP to be stolen. And so these, in fact, it even comes into domains like cuisine. I was talking to someone who works with cooks and chefs in Cambodia just this week, and also talking about they're very protective of their species identification. But I think there's also possibility for new ways to lean in. One of the things I was curious about, these Malaysian team had developed a thing about IP blockchain, um, and I've been curious about that. What kind of can institutions like universities develop ways that people can and contribute to developing this kind of registration of species without necessarily exposing them to the rest of the world, but in a way that they could then make claims as well. So I don't know. I think that's one of the common threads anyway that we've got.
Yeah, I also thought this whole question you brought up, the ethical question, is a really key one, and in some ways similar across the globe, but also the experience from the different parts of the world can shine light on one another. There's the issue, the initiatory knowledge that you mentioned that is relevant not only in Central and South America, but in a lot of Buddhist contexts as well. So
Yeah.
so like what is secret knowledge, and should the secrecy be remained, or how is the secrecy altered? There's kind of fine balance between not losing the knowledge, but not
Yeah.
not extracting it unethically.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the places where the humanities comes in, and the kind of work that we're doing, but and we, not just our pillar, but the Global Humanities Initiative in general. I mean, part of the extractivism and epistemic extractivism isn't just taking the knowledge outside of the communities, but also taking them from one knowledge system to another, right? What a knowledge systems that don't classify or categorize knowledge in the same ways as Western thought does. And so when you take that knowledge and take it out of that context and no longer think of, for example, herb lore as being also right related to philosophy and religion, and you just think of it solely as a biomedical question, like that's part of the violence, right? And that's something that as humanists we can make sure it doesn't happen, right? Like we can make sure that the context remains, right? And that an understanding of what that herb lore means within the knowledge system is part of what gets respected, right? When it becomes disseminated more broadly.
Yeah, there's a very interesting project at the Max Planck Institute, and Dagmar Schaefer was connected to it. This term, the knowables, things that the kind of power and efficacy and authority and financial relations as well to how something is known when it's in a particular context and what happens in that translation practice. And I think this is one of the great things that in the humanities we have, because we have this privilege to think across all these epistemic domains, whereas if you're running a corporation, you've got to pay your investors. If you're a government, you've got to get votes. And if you're a clinic, your medical system has to produce patients. And so the kind of cognitive labor that's needed to really think thickly across those domains, that's the wheelhouse of the
Yeah.
humanities. And I think this is where the GHI is making a really important statement about the role of humanities in globalized knowledge. And we think we have an important stake that we can contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, and linked to that, thinking more culturally and holistically about the concept of an active ingredient.
Yeah.
That also, yeah, came across in a lot of discussions in Delhi as well. Yeah.
Right. Right. Active ingredient and efficacy. Is it efficacious when it's secret? Is it efficacious when an initiate uses it or not? What kind of efficacies do those
Okay.
things mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and what happens to the efficacy when you remove the spiritual bit of it?
Yeah.
Um, Yeah.
I'm looking at the time, and I think this is the moment where we'd like to start bringing the audience in. And I know that Rona, you had a question or two that you wanted to pose to the audience to start the conversation. Is that right?
Yes, and Joaquin, if I may jump in before the Q&A. So I would like to thank you, Michael, Ronit, and Joaquin, again for the insightful and important discussion. And also, I would first like to say like how thankful and grateful because your pillar, like among all the JHI pillar, and you guys actually asked an important question on like how humanities, pre-modern traditional medicine, medical practice, healing art could inform and even elevate like modern medical practice nowadays. And if I may, while the audience are preparing for the Q&A session, and I would like to jump in and say, actually, we think about well-being and personal and public health issue every day, actually, even without us even noticing. And like, for instance, this morning, I'm reading news on Hanta virus this morning, and memories of COVID-19 like suddenly flashback, and I realized how my like daily habit or concept on health I developed during the COVID time actually has been already been a part of my muscle memory without me even noticing. So all I'm saying is what the your pillar medicine and the healing art pillar working on, what you guys are working on is extremely important. And while modern medicine might be the first thing that policymaker or community might have in mind, but your pillar once again remind us that approaching the topic of healing and healthcare from a historical, anthropological, and cultural, even art points of view will definitely bring important insights and actual impacts to our global community. So this is the time for Q&A, and we welcome questions, comments right now. And I heard that Ronin, you have a question prepared for our audience, maybe. And or for our audience, you might type your question and comments in the chat box if this is more convenient for you. So let's open the floor for Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, generally we thought we get the audience to reflect on if they see any ways of their work connecting to ours in any way. So maybe we can first open the floor to that and then just to, yeah, general comments as well.
We have Jonah Judd. You may now
Yeah,
speak.
thank you. This was fabulous and fabulous to learn about what the WHO is going. I just had a small comment on this question of knowledge being transferred across knowledge systems. And I think we can learn from historical actors themselves. For example, in China in the early 20th century, when biomedicine came in, there were efforts there already to grapple with these epistemic issues and how to merge. And there were actually texts that did attempt to merge, for example, Chinese recipes and Western recipes. So I think looking at those efforts is also something that can help us better understand how we can, merge these very different epistemic domains.
I can't agree more. Yeah, I think I mean Ronit and I certainly are deeply informed by the work of people like Sean Lay and others working in the early 20th century, and are very keen to read more. And I think beyond just the translation from from official Chinese medicine and biomedical actors, there's also the work that you're doing, Joan, on vernacular, right, and into the more formal medical systems. And in the book, I'm just finally getting off the rails and out back to the publisher, is looking at those translations between Taoist and medical practitioners in the early imperial period. So that question of translations and movements and change, I think, is a really vital one that's really exciting, and we stand to learn a lot from lots of different examples of that. Yeah. this is like teaching class, when you say, okay, do you have any questions or what's, and the students all go silent for a long time. The thinking time.
I see a question from the chat box. So the question for Michael briefly mentioned the Asian Greco-Arabic medicine when he discussed talk about the WHO conference. Does this tradition factor into your research? Although it's no longer practiced today. For example, do you plan to collaborate with classical scholar of Asian Greco-Roman pharmacology? And a side note that about the work that um, Gil is working on, the healing classics, medical humanities, and the Greco-Roman tradition.
Fantastic. So I have some conversations going on with Tanya Pomerining, who works in Egyptian medicine, and also with Nayan Fancy about doing this, expanding the corpus work. So right now, actually, I have we sort of have an application out to expand to Sanskrit corpuses, and then the next expansion would be naturally, right, to the Arabic and to the Greco-Roman world and in Egypt and Hebrew medicine. So absolutely interested, please drop me an email and let's talk some more. That would be really cool. If the collaboration question is too forward, we could ask another question, which might be, so there's a question from Yaming.
Yeah.
So I'll just read it. You mentioned how traders of medicinal materials in Imperial China were written out of Confucian texts in media. I'm curious where you can find sources that trace their footprints. So a couple of places. One, I read a lot of Taoist texts, and so I see detailed description of meaning making around herbal traditions in Taoist corpuses. That's the subject of a chapter I just finally completed this weekend. But the other thing, then what showed me this most clearly was simply just the maps, because when you read the Banzhao tradition, the earlier pharmacopoeic tradition, you're reading, the drug name and its effects, and then the side notes that say, oh, and in these places. But as a textual experience, these are just kind of buzzwords in the background. And of course, nobody did GIS maps of the world back in when these were written in the third, second to fifth century. But once we did the GIS maps, you could see very clearly that all of the nodes were not on mountains, as the tradition has always said. Oh, these herbs are plucked from the mountains, but all of the nodes were on riverways. And I thought this is very interesting because this is unexpected. And the more I thought about it, I thought about it. And then I finally realized this is because of trade. This is because this is where you get the herbs, not where they're grown. And so if they're talking about where they're being gotten, not where they're growing, that means there's a silenced actor there who are doing this socio-technical translation of, again, translation of wild materials into the sort of economic and literary currents where the Banzhao writers were active and had contacts. So these actors are not written about. They appear occasionally in myths of, oh, this Shenren, this transcendent, came to the marketplace, sold herbs, and went back to his mountain. But it's fairly quietened down. It doesn't have the kind of rich tradition that we have in kind of the later, early modern European works, where people are very interested in craftsmen and traders. So I had to kind of read through the geography to see the silenced textual tradition, the absence of a textual tradition. So one of the things we could raise to everybody is maybe instead of asking, do you see you want to produce a collaborative research project? Let's go, grant storming. Um, where do you see traditional medicine impacting your life? Is it in the chamomile tea that wakes you up in the morning, or is it in certain dietary practices you learned from your grandmother? I don't know. Maybe it would be great to let people share their own experiences of traditional medicine and how it's impacting their daily life.
That's an interesting question, Michael, because like for me, having a background growing up in an Asian city, like and now living in North America, I didn't realize traditional medicine was such an alternative when it comes to medical choices. Because when you grow up in an environment that traditional medicine is just part of your daily meals, and it's fascinating to see how how the knowledge evolve or become a part of the memories instead of daily practices, depending on our culture and how the city grow. It's-
Yeah, it's a question that Singaporean students love to think about. It's not just students, actually everybody. It's a real question of identity and who are we and where are we going? It's really vital. There's a question I think here is for Ronit, really, from Elsa Tina.
So maybe we can read it out so the for the video recording everyone would know. So Ina asks, I need to know how Greco-Roman medicine intersect with traditional medicine from other cultures around Mediterranean and Asia.
Okay, that's a great question, huge question. I think in the book that I mentioned, there's a whole lot of examples of yeah, how Greco-Roman medicine intersected with medicine in one point. I think in the introduction we speak about it from Dublin to Delhi, basically. And in every locality you get the specific synthesis. I've written about this in through the Tibetan context. So we have this fabulous story in Tibetan medical history. It's about how Galen, the great Greco-Roman physician, settled in Lhasa and set up a school and taught students and so on and so forth. So I was really interested in obviously that it didn't happen, but what does this sorry, what does this story tell us? Sorry.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. I think I shared information about your book and the book launch earlier in the chat box. I can paste the link again so everyone can have access to it. And I think we have time for maybe one last question from the team, or from the audience. Doesn't matter. Or comments or
Sorry, sorry, now I've finished coughing just to finish the sentence. So I wrote several articles on this, kind of looking at the dissonance between the myths and the actual traditions and practices. So um, you can uh, you can find the articles, or if not, email me and I'll send them over. Yeah, thank you. Great.
Michael, your mic is muted. Yeah.
I've got a question, Ronnie, which has never occurred to me to ask until this context, which is makes these things really generative and exciting. When do cloves enter Europe as a medicinal? Is there a moment or a time when that comes in? Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but um there is there is a moment where a lot of Indic materia medica comes
Uh,
into Islamic medicine, and and we find this. So there's, for example, a list that comes from Spain. Um, so the Arabic medical sources from Spain, listing all the medicinals that were not listed in the Greek sources.
uh,
So yeah, that'll be kind of where I would start looking. And I presume also in the materia medica literature that we have in the Cairo Geniza,
uh,
um, which would have the materia medica coming through the Indian Ocean, that would also we could date those and when that transmission is happening.
so is that like roughly ninth to 11th century kind of thing?
Possibly, yeah, possibly a bit earlier even, but
Okay. The reason I ask, because not all the viewers might know, cloves, up until the year 1800, only grew in one place in the world, in this island in the southeast of Borneo called the Moluccas, because of volcanic activity. There was a specific mutation. Um, and Amitav Ghosh, the historian novelist, and post-colonial theorist, wrote a whole book, and he presented a talk here almost a decade ago now, on this theory. And it's just saying, oh, cloves was the herb that launched 1,000 ships. In fact, colonialism started because of cloves, and the Dutch and the Portuguese went in to capture the spice trade. At that time, culinary, but it was more expensive than gold, in the 15th century, 14th century. But we see it in Chinese texts entering different kind of, and one of the things that came out of the synonymy work that we did is we dated the entry of where we got it. We dated the entry of terms into the tradition. So cloves are mentioned in the fourth century as a fruit, and then the seed in the fifth, and then the bark in the eighth, and roots in the 11th, and then in the 16th and 18th century, the oil comes in, which I'm thinking that's when you have Europeans coming in. So some kind of essential oil made out of cloves. But it's that's one of those things you would make an interesting around the world question. Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of an um off the top of my head kind of thing. Anyone else have also to open it up for random things that
nice message from Susan Holman.
Any last question, thoughts? Well, if not, then once again, thank you, Joaquin, Michael, and Ronit for preparing this forum and also your wonderful work on the podcast. And one of the mission that GHI really value is that we want to turn deep humanistic research and translate them into a systematic intervention. And this mission cannot be done by one person alone, cannot be done by one discipline if we like stay in a bubble and in our own research. Like this vision like definitely requires collaboration and also interdisciplinary platform to like allow scholars from different background, practitioner from different background to gather together to make it happen. So this is one of the really like deep, valuable message and value that GHI hold on to. So then this is important that we stay connected after the forum. So I once again copy and paste the link to join our mailing list. And in the mailing list, you can specifically say, I have a particular project. I want to collaborate with the medicine and the healing art pillar. I want to connect with the pillar coordinators. So you can say that and when you subscribe the mailing list, and we can definitely connect you two if that's something that you would like to do. So that's all for today, I think. So thank you once again for joining our forum. And we have a forum coming up next. Let me show it to everyone. Let's see. Yep, this is the correct window. So we have our upcoming forum next is on June 5, and that is our heritage, memory, and identity pillar. And it is a very special pillar once again. It has a scholarly background, but also artist background from Bart was not here. You're welcome to join. You will receive sign up information if you sign up for our mailing list. And so that's all for today. And once again, welcome. Thank you for your time and hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Super.
much.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
everyone, for
Thank
coming
you.
in.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your wonderful hosting, Magdalena,
Yes.
and organization.